Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this morning for this HCR Sustainability Updates webinar, where we will be reviewing the updates to the sustainability guidelines as well as the Clean Energy Initiative term sheets. This webinar is recorded and will be circulated after, and we will also be circulating any frequently asked questions in an updated FAQ document as well. Okay, just to dive in for some quick introductions, my name is Sunita Sarvasoran. I am the HCR Sustainability Program Manager under the Sustainability Unit. I'm also joined today by Samantha Pierce, the VP of Sustainability at HCR, as well as Kathleen Berube from HP Sustainability, who will be covering the Clean Energy Initiative portion of the webinar. For a quick overview of the agenda, we'll do some overview of the HCR Sustainability Unit, review the 2023 sustainability guidelines, and then I'll pass it off to Kathleen to review the updates to the CEI term sheets, and we'll save some time at the end for questions. If you do have questions throughout this webinar, please remain muted, but enter the questions in the chat so that we can pull those up at the end of the webinar to review. Okay, for some quick introductions into the HCR Sustainability Unit, for those who are not familiar, in addition to developing and maintaining HCR's sustainability guidelines, which are mandatory for LIHTC and subsidy financing multifamily projects, the Sustainable Unit at HCR also manages several clean energy programs. This includes the Clean Energy Initiative program, which we will be reviewing today, Climate Friendly Homes Fund, which provides funding for small multifamily buildings for electrification work, and the Weatherization Assistance Program, which deploys federal dollars for weatherization services to LMI households. The unit also provides internal technical support across HCR's portfolios on energy efficiency and decarbonization work. So first, we will go over the updates to HCR sustainability guidelines in the 2023 version of the guidelines. For some overview, these guidelines were released in September, so last month, and are applicable to projects applying under the 2023 Fall 9% RFP and any 4% HFA or subsidy-only projects that are closing on January 1st, 2024 or later. The updates were determined through an internal sustainability guideline committee and based on feedback from technical experts that was gathered through 2 separate roundtables over the summer. The updates also include frequently asked questions from the 2022 guidelines. Just for some background, the HCR sustainability guidelines are separated into 3 booklets. There's a new construction booklet, a preservation booklet, and an existing buildings booklet. Only the new construction and existing buildings booklets were updated in this round. The preservation booklet is still under the 2022 version. So before we dive into the specific updates to the guidelines, I do want to quickly orient ourselves. In the following slides, we'll provide a high-level summary of the updates to the 2023 guidelines in a blue box. Snippets from the 2022 and 2023 guidelines will also be provided on the slide with updated language indicated in bolded purple. This webinar will just review the important updates to the baseline requirements and any added stretch goals. We highly recommend that you reference the 2023 guidelines to be up to date on the full revised language, requirements, and goals. So first we'll dive into the major updates to the new construction guidelines. Under Section 1, previously in the 2022 version, projects that selected a stretch goal in Section 1 under the core sustainability requirements were considered to be automatically compliant with Section 2 and could skip ahead to Section 3 requirements. In 2023, projects that select a stretch goal in Section 1 must now comply with baseline requirements in Section 2D, which covers requirements for HVAC systems, before moving on to Section 3. These projects will then be considered compliant with all other subsections of Section 2. This update was really to ensure that all of our new construction projects are implementing high-efficiency all-electric technologies and meeting baseline requirements for those technologies. So you will see this updated graphic in the 2023 updated guidelines. Now we'll go over some major updates that are specific to the existing buildings booklet. So in section 1, several updates were made to provide more certification options for historic designated adaptive reuse properties. So we added PHI low energy building standard and EnerPHit as options under the stretch certification options, which was previously clarified in our sustainability guideline FAQ. So this has been incorporated into the guidelines themselves. Again, changes in the language are bolded in purple on the screen here, but please refer to the updated guidelines on our website. Under section 2 of the existing buildings booklet, the main 2023 guideline updates were made to clarify envelope baseline requirements to account for varying scopes of work in existing building retrofits. So we updated the language to clarify what's required for window replacement only, building envelope work only, or enhancement to both building envelope and windows. Section 2 was also updated to add in a few stretch goals. A stretch goal was added for substantial rehab projects to pursue high performance envelope and ventilation, and a stretch goal was also added for in-unit ERVs. Finally, there were several clarifications and updates that are common across both booklets, which we will dive into here. In section 1, reference to the now closed NYSERDA new construction housing program has been removed, and additional third-party green building certifications were included in lieu of this program. This update also clarifies the required programs for climate bond initiatives for new construction and adaptive reuse projects that must comply with those requirements. Finally, the stretch goals were clarified based on the FAQ. So LEED Zero Energy is required in addition to LEED B4 or 4.1 B, D, and C. Under section 2, the main updates are moving measures that are now required by New York State Energy Code from stretch goals to baseline. This really applies for lighting controls requirements as well as to ERV for common areas. We also clarified baseline and stretch goals for building envelope thermal performance based on feedback on how to demonstrate percentage improvement over code. We also clarified the baseline minimum efficiency, performance, and installation requirements for heat pumps based on feedback we received on the COP requirement. We now reference the NEEP cold climate heat pump list as well as specifications. We revised the allowable electric equipment for heating and domestic hot water. For example, in-unit electric resistance storage tanks and sub-central electric resistance storage tanks are now permitted. And we added in requirements and restrictions for where integrated heat pump water heaters are allowed. And we also incorporated water monitoring as a stretch goal in section 2. Finally, in section 3, under additional sustainability requirements, we revised the shelter-in-place requirements to clarify the required duration for backup power and the size of the common area that is required based on questions received under the 2022 guidelines. With that, I will pass it over to Kathleen, who will review the updates to the Clean Energy Initiative Program and the updates to the term sheets. If you have any questions, please continue to enter them to the chat, but I will pass it over to Kathleen.
Thanks, Anita. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Kathleen Berube. I'm with HP Sustainability. We're a contracting group that is supporting HCR in developing sustainability initiatives. We supported the creation and launch of the Clean Energy Initiatives, or CEI program. So if you're new to CEI, I will first take you through a brief overview of the program and then dive into a few important key updates. Next slide, please. So CEI's broad goal is to encourage the development of high performance buildings in New York. Specifically, it provides funding for development projects to pursue decarbonization scopes of work. And a key element of CEI is that it provides clean energy funds alongside other HCR funds, effectively creating a streamlined one-stop shop for clean energy funds. So rather than going to a number of different places for smaller pots of funding, CEI provides deep incentives designed to cover the full incremental costs of pursuing decarbonization. CEI was launched in 2021 and began with 2 pilot phases to really test the waters to see if developers wanted these funds delivered in this way. These 2 demonstration pilots were very successful. The first pilot phase included funding for new construction and adaptive reuse to meet passive house, enterprise green communities, or advanced levels of Energy Star. CEI began by asking projects to apply to the program using their business as usual building design, so changing nothing outside of what a project would normally do in terms of design. After submitting an application for CEI, projects were asked to detail how they would up design to meet the CEI scope of work. We continued this approach into phase 1B and expanded the program to include existing buildings. CEI went through a big redesign to achieve the fully launched version of the program that's on the streets today. CEI is now integrated into the financing applications for the 4% and 9% programs. CEI is structured as a term sheet. Developers now apply to HCR with their CEI design included in their building. And the CEI program directly ties back to HCR's sustainability guidelines. CEI funds HCR's stretch sustainability goals. You can go to the next slide. I think it's important to set out how this program is different and innovative from others in the market. HCR has really set up this program to work for the development community, specifically by removing a lot of the traditional barriers in accessing energy dollars. Some of those barriers specifically include funds not coming in during the construction period, not being able to be used as a source in a deal, not fully covering incremental costs, and specifically grant dollars interfering with the project's basis. So CEI offers developers several key advantages. Namely, CEI is predictable. It's structured as a term sheet. Developers have access to these term sheet and have insight into what's expected in terms of funding levels and also the scope that needs to be achieved. As I mentioned before, there's no separate application to CEI. It's baked into the financing applications for HCR development programs, and the funds can be used as a source. In fact, funds are structured like other subsidy sources and treated like other subsidy sources. And funds can be drawn on the way that other HCR sources of funding are drawn on. This looks a little bit different on the 4 and 9% sides. Next slide, please. CEI has been very successful to date, especially considering it's only been around for about 2 years now. In total, there have been 26 projects awarded CEI funding, which equates to $22.9 million. The projects that HCR has awarded are dispersed across the state. There are projects both in the downstate area and many in the upstate area as well. The first projects that were awarded CEI funding are nearing the end of complete construction and will be placed into service in the next few months. Next slide, please. So digging into the contents of the term sheets just quickly. So CEI is structured as 3 separate term sheets. And so the type of construction of a building determines which term sheet you use. So for example, for new construction, the award amount, the base amount is $5,500 per unit or $1.375 million maximum per project. What's unique to the new construction term sheet is that there are boost eligibility that allow a project to receive up to $7,500 per unit or $1.5 million maximum. And I would direct you to the term sheet itself to see the specific boost eligibility, but the short of it is that this is designed for projects that are more difficult to develop or for developers that don't have experience developing high performance buildings to date. So the scope for new construction relates directly back to the new construction sustainability guidelines, specifically the certifications that are listed in the stretch section of Section 1, which include Passive House, LEED version 4.1 with a 0 designation, and Enterprise Green Communities Plus. The adaptive reuse term sheet mirrors new construction pretty closely with a few key differences. The award amount for adaptive reuse is $12,500 per unit or $2.5 million maximum. The certifications are similar with a few key additions for adaptive reuse, which include EnerPHit, PHI Low Energy Building Standard. And another key unique factor for adaptive reuse is that projects with a SHPO historic designation often have a difficult time achieving some of these advanced certifications, specifically the building envelope requirements. So if that is the case, adaptive reuse projects with a SHPO historic designation have the option of following the existing building term sheet. So finally, the existing building term sheet, the award amount is up to $25,000 per unit or $12.5 million per project maximum, depending on the goals that are selected. So the existing building term sheet is a little bit different in that it highlights 3 unique goals that center around building decarbonization and advanced performance. So for example, if you select electrification of heating, you can receive up to $8,500 per unit. Electrification of domestic hot water, up to $4,000 per unit, and advanced envelope and ventilation up to $12,500 per unit. So you can select one of these goals, 2, or all 3, and the funding amount would follow which goals you select. We can go to the next slide. So there's a few key changes to the program that you should be aware of. We're going to go through each of them on a following slide, but they're just listed here in summary first. So we can go on to the next slide. The first change has to do with the systems benefits charge. Because CEI funds are provided by NYSERDA, they are considered ratepayer funds. So CEI projects must be located in a utility territory who pays into the systems benefits charge. And this really includes most of New York. Only small segments of New York are excluded from this. And a good way to tell if your project is located in or outside the SBC is by looking at your utility bill. And the systems benefits charge would be listed as a line item on your utility bill. I think all of the major investor-owned utilities pay into the SBC. It's really some of the smaller municipally owned utilities that do not. The key change is that HCR has a limited pot of funding that allows projects who do not pay into the systems benefits charge to participate in CEI. And these funds are on a first come, first served basis. This applies only to the existing buildings term sheet. And again, an easy way to check if this applies to your project is to look at the utility bill. Next slide, please. Another key change is that HCR has expanded CEI to additional pipelines. Previously, CEI was limited to the 4% and 9% programs. And so now projects of all major construction types that are in HCR's subsidy financing program can also participate in CEI. So that subsidy financing program is projects not receiving HCR tax credits, but receiving HCR subsidy. Next slide, please. And finally, the last important update is that the per project maximum for existing buildings has been increased pretty substantially. So previously, existing buildings could receive a per project maximum of 5.6 million, and that has been expanded to 12.5 million. And again, this is for existing buildings only. Next slide. So the next few slides will serve just as a refresher on how to apply to CEI and what the process looks like from the development standpoint. So as I mentioned before, you apply to CEI through your financing application for the program that you're applying to. So either the 9%, 4%, or subsidy only pipeline. And there are specific tabs contained within the financing application that pertain to CEI that HCR will ultimately use to check for compliance against the term sheet. So on the 9% side, that's specifically D3 and D6 forms, and on the 4% and subsidy only side, that is the M1 and M2 form. On the next slide, we have just a quick screenshot of what the D6 form looks like. So you can see that there are places where you can specifically list if you are pursuing a stretch goal, depending on your construction type, and there's also a specific CEI section to the D6 form. And D3 is where you list out the details of your scope. So this is a screenshot of where you would list out your HVAC details and domestic hot water. And so HCR will be using this form to judge compliance against the term sheet. Next slide, please. So a brief overview of the CEI process, really from a development standpoint. So that first step is really program application. So it's kind of what we just went over. So you apply to CEI at the same time that you're applying to one of HCR's pipelines. You're awarded CEI funds alongside the larger program award, and you'll receive notification of the award the same way that you receive notification of other HCR awards. So from there, your project enters the design period, and really what HCR is looking for is for projects to submit their permit set of drawings, which will be reviewed by a technical assistance provider. And the technical assistance provider is looking specifically to make sure the CEI scope is integrated into the project drawings. And so the TA provider also has the opportunity to issue comments to be resolved before closing, specifically regarding the CEI scope of work. So after the drawings look good, a project proceeds to closing, and CEI funds close alongside other HCR funds. So during construction, the funds are drawn down the same way that other HCR sources are drawn down. So on the 4% side, that often looks like construction funding, and on the 9% side, it's structured as a reservation letter that gets drawn down towards the end of construction. The technical assistance provider conducts site visits throughout construction at key milestones to ensure that the CEI scope is being realized as designed in the drawings. And then after construction is complete, during operations, projects submit benchmarking data to HCR annually. Next slide, please. This is my last slide on CEI. Just wanted to bring this up because CEI is designed to fund the full incremental costs of achieving decarbonization scopes of work. So for that reason, CEI projects are not eligible for many of the other traditional clean energy sources of funding that are in the market. So you can see many of NYSERDA's programs are included in this list, Con Ed's AMEP program, and also the HPD retrofit pilot and future housing initiative pilots. There are a few sources that can be combined with CEI, including Clean Heat, HUD's GRRP program, and NYSERDA's Flex Tech for pre-design activities, and NYSERDA's Charge Ready program. Next slide, please. So that is the CEI overview, and I think we will open it up for a Q&A.
Great, thanks, Kathleen. I'm going to stop sharing my screen